And today I've asked Boyce Sherwin to come and speak to you. He is a professional from Regional Solutions, and he says he's covering the property values, common growth of taxes, standard contract problems with turbine companies, and pilot issues. He's a business and government consultant who works on a wide range of projects and 40 years of running the Office of Community Development in Malone. He raised over $5.5 million in grants and renovated more than 200 homes. He also served on the board of Malone Central School IDA, Complete Streets and Others Community, and his professional and personal focuses. Prior work includes real estate development in Manhattan, where he managed many development projects, including one with a value greater than $1 billion. He has a master's in public and private management from Yale University. So please welcome Boyce Sherwin.
Is it okay if I just speak to you? All right, great. I grew up in Malone. My dad was a doctor and a dairy farmer, which is a nice way to be a dairy farmer. I appreciate that. But, so I grew up till I was 18, milking cows and chasing them around, basically. Moved away. Went down to Manhattan, where I got an MBA, a Master of Management from Yale, and then I got into real estate development. And I worked for big developers doing acquisitions. So I would go out and value projects and value what we could do with them, you know. And then I worked for New York Hospital, which it turns out is a giant real estate owning entity, and did, among other projects, one that had a value well in excess of $1 billion. And I was the manager of that. So about 15 years ago, I came back to Malone, ran the community development office, and the expertise I think that I brought to that is that when I worked for developers, they might own a giant piece of property. And when you go to a developer and somebody makes an offer, are they interested? The answer is always yes. Yeah, I'm interested. Are we going to do it? Well, that depends. And so I put myself in the position, this project that we're seeing here is basically a very large piece of your community. There is a value associated with it. Are you interested in discussing the value of that property and what this project might bring in? The answer is yes. Always interested in discussing. Is this a good project? Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at it. But this is the role that I played for developers. They would say to me, is it a good project? And then, then you start getting into some deep weeds, but you can figure it out. There is a rational way to look at it. We're just talking about money. The first point that I wanted to bring up, property values. I'm on a board in the village of Malone called Complete Streets. And the goal of Complete Streets is to make, Malone has been given over to traffic. And we have a beautiful main street that is almost completely barren because it's a terrible experience to walk down the street. If you're walking with somebody, you have to shout to them. It's so loud. So it just devalued the whole property. So Complete Streets is trying to bring back the use of a community for everybody. For kids, middle-aged people, and elderly. Why do you do that? Well, if you destroy the value of your community, it dies, and you have no more value. So Complete Streets, I pitch it as a thing, if this has a value for elderly. The elderly is the biggest growing group of the population, as I'm sure you're aware. And if we are destroying this community as a valuable place for elderly, we're cutting off one of our main economic supports of the community. So my concern with wind turbines is that it eliminates people who might want to buy. For instance, the biggest problem for me is the nighttime sky. I am a lover of the nighttime sky, having grown up in the Adirondacks. And when I look out over a turbine field of 70 or 80 or 90 turbines with the lights going across the sky, which is how they go, I would not live there. And therefore, I am lost as a potential buyer of property. You're going to cut out buy a wind turbine development, in my opinion, and I've been paid an awful lot of money for an awful lot of years to give this opinion. My opinion is that you eliminate the high end and perhaps a good part of the middle end, what I would call the, nobody's going to come into a wind turbine field and build a $500,000 house. It's not going to happen. There's an awful lot of people that want to build a $250,000 house, and in my opinion, the majority of them will not do it either. I believe that the low end is probably not affected greatly. However, Ann just showed me some data from an appraiser further west of here, and he looked at it from a kilometer away, from 2 to 3 kilometers away, from 5 kilometers away, which is the way it should be approached. From about 1 to 3 kilometers, there was a 26% property value decline. That doesn't seem bad to me. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was significantly more than that. So anyway, through actual looking at sales values, this guy documents about a 26% decline. So what's that mean to your community? The community runs on income. Government is a necessity. Government is important, and it runs on income. If you cut the property value of your community by 26%, that's the income of your government. That's it. We don't know how long these turbines will stay up. I think, they're rated for, generally the contracts are somewhere between 15 and 20 years. So at the end, and also that property decline will take some time to kick in, right? Let's say 10 years, 2/3 of it is kicked in. By the end of 20 years, the decline in value is there. So your potential, your ability to generate income, not just for your town government, but for your school, which is the big one to me, is down at least 25, 26%. And by that point, you've pretty well run out of, the turbines might have stopped. Nobody really knows. They haven't been up that long, right? You don't know how long they're going to continue. So the big problem I see is that you're limiting buyers and you're decaying the growth of your community and the actual, not just the growth, but the current stability of your community is on a downward spiral, in my opinion. And like I said, that's the advice I would give if there was one person sitting here and he owned 15,000 acres out there, and I've dealt with such people. That's the advice I would give him. And there's really no difference. I think that the communities run into problem when they start thinking, well, it's just my little parcel. It's not. You together are the owners and the controllers of the whole area. And the value of the whole area is important to you. I won't go any further into that. If you don't believe me, there we go. So community growth and taxes, property values going down. How much? In excess of 25%. But also, don't forget, you're eliminating whole classes of buyers. You're just eliminating standard contract problems with wind turbine companies. Interesting stuff. I did an awful lot of contract work because representing New York Hospital, I controlled over 70 retail properties in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I had very large parcels of land in White Plains, all sorts of things. So I ran into an awful lot of contract issues all over the place. And interestingly enough, people play games in contracts. Games that you would hope your lawyer would find, but they often do not. And here's one I found in the wind turbine contracts, which I thought was funny. At the end of the contract, they'll have about 8 or 9 pages on how the land will be restored at the end of the turbine contract life. The turbine will be taken down, that the land will be covered over by 8 or 10 feet of soil. It will be restored by native vegetation. And then it says, right at the very end, the town is responsible for doing this. So, and it's only a guy like me who actually reads every damn line all the way through, because I've been, been taken advantage of. So I, through nasty lessons, learned to read all the lines. Now that's just one of the things that I've discovered. So there are, well, I talked to one town that was getting them, and I said that to them. And I think the standard affair, or the standard issue, is the turbine companies will offer the town $50,000 to put in escrow to take the turbines down. And I've never taken a turbine down. I'm not sure what it would cost, but I don't think you can take many turbines down for $50,000, nor can you do much restoration. So it literally is leaving it up to the towns. So all that is smoke and mirrors. It's a polite way to put it. Will anybody take the turbines down? This buddy of mine who's a farmer says, why do you even ask that? Why do you ask, are they going to take them down? He says, I drive down the road and I see these old silos and the roof is gone. He says, nobody takes the silo down. He said, when the farmer dies, his silo falls apart. It's a monument. It's there. So, are the turbines coming down? Probably not. They'll fall down eventually, and they'll rust up eventually. And the worst part for me, I can't even imagine living close to one, but the worst part for me is the night sky filled with these red lights flashing right across the horizon. I find that terrible, and I'm assuming that would, I don't know. I guess it won't end. The FAA will make them keep it up. Even if the turbine doesn't work and they're not paying rent anymore, someone will have to keep it up. Maybe it's the town. I don't know. Maybe it's the property owner. Whoever. But someone's going to have to keep them up because things will crash into them. So there are all sorts of contract issues. Oh, and by the way, standard is the wind turbine pays for your attorney. There is one attorney that goes all over the North Country, and he represents all the towns, paid for by the wind turbine company. So the wind turbine companies pay for him. Who's he work for? That's it. The wind turbine company. That's it. Oh, no, he works for us. No, he doesn't. Whoever gives him the check is who he works for. So, if you want to actually be represented by an attorney, you're going to have to cough up some money. Or you get an attorney and then you insist that the wind turbine people give a check to the community. You do not have them pay anybody directly, and my sincere advice would be this guy that has represented every town in the North Country, get somebody else. There are energy specialist attorneys. I believe that's what you need. Okay, pilot issues. I looked at the wind turbines. There's 72 wind turbines right now in Chateauguay. They're going to put in another 30 or so. Those 72 wind turbines, I was on the Franklin County IDA, which is the agency that grants pilots. St. Lawrence County IDA will grant the pilot, and they don't need your permission, by the way. They generally ask the community to go along, but they don't have to. Anyway, I analyzed the pilot that was proposed, and almost always, and the communities accept it. It's such a great deal, they accept it. So I analyzed it, and what it looked like to me was that the town of Chateauguay got about a 50% tax value. The school system and the county got about a 5% tax value. But the town is the controlling agency, right? The town, these are home rule communities. The town's control zone. So I thought, well, that sucks. Even right there, you know, the towns always say, oh God, we've got all this money. It's like, yeah, how about twice as much? Just for laughs. Okay, here's the problem. And I don't know this to be true because I've only dealt with the lawyer who represents the town, but in my opinion represents the wind turbine companies. Okay, and this is why I think that there might be a real value in hiring an energy specialist attorney. Is that this attorney says the laws of New York State limit how much you can tax or how much is taxable on wind turbine projects. And that limit is approximately 5% of the value of the wind turbines. Now that means that in fact the towns are getting a pretty good deal. When you figure out your pilot, you figure out what is taxable as of right. That's where you start. Now, they're claiming that only 5% of the value of that project is taxable as of right. So anything they give you above that, oh, aren't we such clever negotiators? And I see that all the time, too. If you're getting 5% of the value, I don't think 25% loss in value of your community is actually worth it. That's what I would say to the big shot who was sitting there with 15,000 acres of land. Is it worth it? I don't think so. What's it worth to the wind turbine companies? 72 wind turbines in Chateauguay, New York. This is about 8 years ago, 10 years ago. 72 wind turbines. After everything was said and done, within a year of signing of the pilot agreement, the wind turbine company mortgaged those 72 turbines with no other liens on any other properties. Just this, full stop, for $750 million. Okay? So there is no reason to give them a break on their taxes. I'm just telling you. However, if New York State has set it up so that it's only taxable at 5%, well, then, you know, now we have an argument. This is where your town officials become really important. This is where your IDA people become really important. I've been through this twice. I still don't have the information I need to actually negotiate a good contract. Professionally, I would require an energy specialist attorney to advise me on the values. However, that $750 million was over a 300% profit in year one. Now remember, just like you, nobody mortgages at 100% of value. They probably only mortgaged it at 80% of value. So holy mackerel, there's a lot of value out there. Why are they doing this? Wow. Real money. Real money. There is no reason for a community to give its future over at a bargain rate. And I'll say that one more time. That's the advice I would give to the big shot who is sitting on 15 or 20,000 acres. And you are no different. You're just more people. It's the same value system. It's the same control and ownership system. There's no difference between a community and an individual as far as value goes. I'll pull that back a little bit. Yeah, there is some difference. But in economic value, there is no difference. That is a game that I've played over and over and over again. Okay. What would you do if you decide you want it and you want to optimize your value? There's an interesting question, huh? Now this is another game that I played with the big shots. That was my job. Can you analyze it? Yes, you can analyze it. You have to know what as of right is, and then you have to know what other leverage you have. I think you have huge leverage. You have huge leverage in that they don't come here if the town says no. So the town has to understand they have power, and they can use that power to the benefit of the people and the locale. All right, so the first step, what the people in Pennsylvania did with the fracking, which is no joyful thing to have in your neighborhood either, but at least some people made real money off of it. How did they make money? They made money because they hired lawyers as a group and then organized and negotiated for their individual contracts as a group. What the wind turbine companies do is they cut it, they're brilliant. Their organizing, I think, is brilliant. They go to one person at a time, and they cut a contract with them, and then they put a confidentiality clause on that contract. Now, that's perfect for our, I'm a tough guy and I'll do my family the best kind of attitude that we have around here. It's the old farmer attitude, right? I work hard, I'll cut my deal. Well, it's like little kids playing with professionals. Don't do it. You have no power as an individual. You're going to get the worst deal possible. Maybe juice it up 20%, big deal. You should be juiced fivefold. Is there money there? Well, 72 turbines can support a $750 million mortgage. There's value out there. Nobody needs to make 300% on year one, especially when there's no risk, right? They're not taking on any risk. The government has said that they're going to buy the power. The government is going to give them all the benefits. New York State just gave a grant of $200 million to the new turbine field that's going up in Chateauguay and Belmont. Now I think that's over $4 million a turbine. 10 years ago when I was dealing with this, they assumed that the turbine's total cost, put up all the engineering, all of the planning that had to be done, all of the organizing, all of the contracting, was under $3 million a turbine. So, these are bigger also, by the way. They are bigger, they will cost more, But to get about a grant of about $4 million a turbine, there's no need for the community to give them further benefits. They can pay full freight. Okay, so organize to negotiate, get your own lawyer, along with a lawyer to review the contracts. I urge you to get an energy specialist lawyer. I've heard so much conflicting information. How much of these projects is taxable? If it's 5%, then you've got to come from a whole different direction. But that direction is, if you want to be here, you pay. The town controls what happens. That's it. If you want to be here, you pay. And the private landowners, for God's sake, do not negotiate on your own. Come on. That's just, that's just giving yourself over to the wolves. That's pretty much what I've got. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So the $750 million mortgage, what happens if this company defaults on that mortgage?
Oh, they're not going to.
Okay.
It's worth too much money.
Or what happens if they go bankrupt?
There's a very low possibility of bankruptcy. Basically what this is giant finance companies doing things with other finance companies. It might even be an internal mortgage. Now you can have, in real estate development, in Manhattan, I worked for a guy that had probably 20 buildings in Manhattan. Every single building was its own corporation, because you don't want to get caught in a domino effect if something goes wrong. He literally would walk around with corporation papers in his pocket, and all you'd have to do is fill in the address, new corporation. Them going bankrupt is not particularly a problem. There is a value there. I don't know of any that have gone bankrupt. Your lawyer should do a wicked security issue regarding that. It is always an issue. Always, always, always. You've got to deal with somebody. They're going to give you $1 million a year. Well, what makes you think they're going to continue doing that? That's the question. And that is a contract issue that your attorney would have to work out. There has to be penalties. Yes?
Okay, this area has pretty much seen a big drain out of young people.
Yes.
Most of them are moved away. My
Yes.
son moved away because there's no work. I mean, our land values and our property values, I see all kinds of empty homes near me.
Yes.
And you're saying it's gonna go down by another 25% maybe? I mean,
Okay.
it already is like stagnant or.
I hear you. Will it affect it? Yes. The reason it will affect it is that when values drop, that creates a value. What I would look for if there were a lot of vacant properties is a mass buyer. Forget it. They're gone. They will not come into a turbine field operation and do a mass buy. So that's the problem, is that you're, just like Malone is restricting the value of the community for elderly because there are bad sidewalks and very uncomfortable roads. Okay, it has to be addressed. What you're doing by bringing in a mass turbine field basically is industrializing a rural environment. I lived in Manhattan for 20 years, and I loved it. But I moved back to the country. And go out to Chateauguay. It changed it. It's remarkable how much it changed it. And in my opinion, not only did it reduce home buyers, classes of home buyers, but for instance, they closed down a prison out there, and you can't get anybody to buy it. And it was all good property, and it's very good manufacturing, it's very good office space, it's good for a lot of things, but there are turbines all around it. It's going to be hard getting anybody to go into that.
What
Yes.
about the Amish? They actually are moving in. Is that gonna drive them away?
Or, you
Yeah.
have to ask them specifically, I would say. Yes.
My sister has a home in Chateauguay, and it's been on the market for over a year. It's a beautiful home up on a hill, surrounded in the back. She's not one person has looked at her property.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we have such spectacular views around here. I mean, look at today. It's a glorious day. And so a lot of times you want to be up on a hill, although that exposes you to the wind. But if you're in a wind turbine field, being on a hill is worse. Boom. You know, so instead of a $200,000 or $250,000 house, you have a $75,000 house. Somebody will buy it. You know, if you drop the price low enough. But better not have any mortgage, of course, or else the cash to pay off your mortgage. But if you have a $200,000 house, you get it down to 75 or 60. Somebody will buy it.
Do you see the wind turbine people buying actual property? Because my nephew said somebody from the wind turbine
Only
company
by,
was interested in her home.
Only by rumor. I have no evidence of any purchases. And, you know, not everybody is affected. Some people are affected strongly. Some people appear to not be affected. So if somebody works on them, who knows, maybe, you know, and he could buy a $200,000 house for $70,000, not much risk, yes.
Can you talk a little more, you mentioned town officials and IDA. What
Okay.
about county level? Or can you review what people can do interacting with their?
The IDA in Franklin County and in most counties, the IDA members are appointed, generally a county legislator gets to appoint one person to the IDA, to the IDA board. The IDA board hires an executive director. That board controls the executive director, and they vote on pilots. Now, like I said, they generally will ask the school system, the county, and the towns if they approve of the pilot. They do not have to. In my experience with Clinton County IDA and Franklin County IDA, there was not a person on the board, the executive director, nobody knew anything about valuing pilots. Nothing. It was ridiculous. So the wind turbine companies made a proposal, and the people that wanted to be tough said, "Oh, we'd like 20% more." And they go, "Oh, okay, sure." So yes.
I was told by someone from over towards Lake Ontario, I can't remember if it was Clayton or where, that her son went in to refinance his home, and just because there were wind turbines proposed for behind his house, that the banker dropped the value of his home and wouldn't lend him as much on it. Just because it was proposed. And are they also, is that required if someone's trying to sell a home, that they have to,
Oh, I don't know.
don't know about that one.
Would they have to reveal that?
Right, in the disclosure.
I don't know. Yes.
It seems to me that there are at least a couple of discussions about home values. One is a proposed probably 25 or 30% drop in home values. Another discussion is, sounds like a fair number of people need to leave their homes or at some point want to sell, and there may not be any buyers.
Yeah.
That's a big change in real estate principles or whatever. And they're not really tied together. Home value loss isn't maybe 25 or 30%,
It
except
could be
according to
80% or 100%. Yes.
right, yeah.
The big problem, it comes, and there are, and I have actually known people who had to leave. Okay, you have to leave. Most people's biggest investment is their home. You can't find a buyer, or two, you have to discount it 65%. Okay. What remaining mortgage do you have on that house? Do you have the money to cover it? Can you afford to pay that? Do you declare bankruptcy and walk away from the house? It's pretty tough to own a home, not be able to live in that home, have a mortgage payment, and then have to pay for something else and not be able to sell your house. And selling houses, even in good times around here, is difficult. So, yes.
I would like to know how exactly we're supposed to fight pilot agreements if you say the IDA has the ultimate control.
Yes.
Because we've been asking our town council and town supervisors and our school boards to opt out of a pilot because it just doesn't make economic sense. If we're gonna be losing all this money on our tax base with our properties, to then on top of it have the pilot agreement, I mean, we stand to lose millions of dollars here.
Okay. If the taxable value of this project is 5%, you want the pilot because that's going to be greater than 5%. That's your problem.
But it's still a fraction of what we're gonna lose. I mean, we've read studies that, I mean, this is basically farming communities. And they kill millions of bats, bats kill insects, insects destroy crops. So you've got where we're going to have a much lower crop yield here, which equates to millions of dollars.
Right.
So, why can't the IDA see that this is a lose-lose proposition, not a win?
Okay, here's what happens. The wind turbine companies come in and they spend 2 years cutting out individuals and cutting deals with individuals. Those individuals then start pressuring. I went to a town, I spoke at a town one time, there were 7 members on the board, 5 of them had cut deals, and they were all voting, and they were all in on the negotiations. It was funny.
Awesome.
It was funny, yeah. Told me to sit down and shut up. There you go. Okay. So they were in. Who you elect to your town matters. Most people, when they look at town officials, they say, oh, well, you know, they run a budget of $2 million or $5 million, whatever it is, no big deal. And that is a big deal. But the really big deal is that they control all these outside agencies. They control the New York State DOT. They control the wind turbine companies. They control things that dwarf their budget. So you need real people on the town board.
Who are representing us, not
One hopes.
certain individuals.
In my opinion, there's no one, I know of no one in the North Country that actually has a handle on pilot or pilot negotiation. If you don't have a handle on the pilot, you don't know what, you're just throwing darts with your blindfold on. That's what you're doing. Oh, I want a little more. Oh, big deal. You don't know anything. You're just guessing. There's no need to guess, but you need actual expertise. And it is not the lawyer that handles every town in the North Country. He works for the wind turbine companies. There you go. You need a specialist in energy law. They can say, This is the deal. Now, if you only, okay, so I'm sitting down with the big shot, and he says, well, as of right is only 5%. Well, and the big shot is you. I'm sitting down with you. So we're negotiating. How do you negotiate with one of these companies? As of right's 5%. Is that worth it? Well, they say, we'll give the town 10 times that much. We'll give the town 50% of what the total value tax would be. And towns go, oh, wow, that's fabulous. And they say yes, and then the town people, you know, go to the school board and say, we want you to accept this. Yeah, but it's, you know, what do we get? We don't get anything. All right, on and on and on. So that's how it works. So what you have to do is the towns control it, and then the county legislators and the IDA board. The IDA board is divorced somewhat from the county legislators, but, you know, hopefully there is some contact, and the county legislators should say, we need more. How I would do it, I would insist that I would research an energy specialist attorney or a law firm, you know, get on the phone and say, hi, we're a little community way up in the North Country. You'll have to go to Boston, you'll have to go to New York. You don't have to go there, but that's where they'll be. They will not be running around the North Country. This is what we're being presented with. I would like a proposal from you as to what you think would need to be covered, how you could help us, and what it would cost. And don't even think about $200 an hour. Going up. Okay, if they, and what projects have you handled in the past? You should get at least a couple of them. 3 is better, you know, right? Anybody here bid out stuff? 3 is good. 2 is a necessity. 1, you're just making yourself a sucker bait. And then you're going to need to educate the IDA. Maybe get the IDA to pay for it. Okay, they've got money. St. Lawrence County. Or the combination of the IDA and the county legislators. Nobody, in my firmly held opinion, has a clue as to what's going on with negotiation with these wind turbine companies. And I did 20 years in negotiations, so, you know, I know when I'm out of my depth. Yes?
I was told that the IDA will actually receive funds from the company.
You bet. There is a conflict of interest, you betcha.
How do we get them to?
That's part of the game. That's how an IDA supports itself. Will they take a fund? The Franklin County IDA is going to get $1.5 million. The Franklin County IDA was so poorly managed. They haven't done a loan in 4 years. They haven't done a bond in 4 years. They were on the verge of growing broke. They had to cut a deal. They literally were going to have to close the offices. Just rank incompetence. So, what is their incentive? Their incentive is cut a deal, make it fast. Yeah, it's a problem. So, there are a lot of conflicting problems here. There's a lot of incentive for people to not behave in the actual interests of the community. Sorry, yes.
So you're saying if the towns opt out of this pilot?
It might get worse.
So the IDA can step in and?
Oh, sure. Yes, which they might anyway, because then they get a fee.
Right.
Everybody could opt out of the pilot, say, no, we don't want a pilot. It might be worse for the towns. I don't think it would be much worse for the schools or the county. It would be about what they get on average. But the IDA might say, no, we want that $2 million or $1.5 million. So you're getting a pilot, and then they might negotiate on your behalf and give you a little more, you know. That would be a nice way to make it look like they're really doing you a favor. Yes?
If the pilots are a bad deal, what other ways can the town